And greetings, happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on BlazeTV radio and podcast. It is good to be back home here inside the comfy confines of our Blaze Studios, Des Moines adjunct location. I am Steve Deace with Todd Erzen and Aaron McIntyre. Good to see you again, gentlemen.
Hello.
We are brought to you by our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company. They are a Christian-owned patriot coffee company with a flavor for every freedom-loving American. It is shipped to you within days of being roasted, so it doesn't just sit there roasting on the shelf so that by the time it gets to you, it's burnt or stale. First Cup places the roast on date right there on each and every bag. If you want to take advantage of it, get a discount, go to firstcup.com. Use the promo code DACE. Don't do it because they have your values. Do it because they make great coffee and they have your values. Firstcup.com, promo code DACE. Again, firstcup.com, promo code DACE. All right, coming up here on the program today, there's a lot of stuff hitting the fan. Let me just give you to set up Aaron's montage and what you're about to be subjected to. Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard, TD Ameritrade, E-Trade, UPS, CenturyLink, and Interactive Brokers reported outages and errors amid market crashes within the last hour. About a week ago, we had systemic errors and outages of our airline industry, which, if you're flying right now, and I just did back to Dallas and back here again, we still have not yet completely recovered from all of the various delays and cancellations that went on during that standpoint. Understand the signs of the times. We're going to be talking a lot about that here today. Next hour, there is an article. I wanted to cover this almost a month ago on the show. But
stuff.
They tried to kill Trump, and so it got put off. And then some other things have happened since then. We've had a coup. I mean, yeah. We're sitting through what at the very least right now, to me, it looks as if on the low end of this, you're looking at a 2008, albeit for different reasons than the housing crisis of 2008, but you're looking at that, some level of a 2008 downturn. That looks like, to me, the low stakes of what we're probably looking at right now. That's the most optimistic take, I think. Some things have happened since we were going to feature this piece. But I think it is very important to feature this piece because the most important institution in any culture is the church. It is the only transcendent institution that God has ever given us east of Eden. It exists outside of time and space, as we know it. It stands the test of time, or at least it's supposed to. And yet, corporately and systemically, the church is very sick, and many of the things that you are seeing right now play out in our culture, and even economically, are really symptoms of this. Because the church is the institution that God primarily uses to guide his creation in this era. And I didn't say, did I say exclusively uses? Is that what I said? No, but primarily uses. It is where teaching comes from. It is where evangelism comes from. It is where discipleship comes from. It is where encouragement comes from. It is where healing comes from. Ethos, pathos, ethics all come from, or are supposed to anyway, from the church. When it doesn't, when those things do not, a plumb line in a culture has been lost. A cornerstone has gone wobbly. And then what can the righteous do if the foundations be destroyed? And I think we are living through these kinds of times in our culture right now, including with what we'll talk about here in a few moments. And so I wanted to make sure that we went back and highlighted this piece, because I think if we're gonna reset things with the church so that we can then reset things with this culture, some really difficult conversations I think need to take place. Not the stuff of sweater vests, church growth consultants, Not the stuff of pleated khakis and skinny jeans, but some really difficult questions have to happen and be answered. And the kinds of, pardon the expression, come to Jesus meetings that are uncomfortable need to be held. And so we're going to hold one next hour. Not looking forward to that necessarily, but it's something that is so important that even though the impetus for it now is an article that was published well over about a month ago, I think July 5th actually, so 1 month to the day, I think it's so vitally important that we're going to give it the hearing that I thought it deserved at the time, coming up in the next hour of the show. But before we get to that, here is Aaron's rundown of what happened. Something wicked this way comes. Here's Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by...
Cure the economy and the environment.
If you couldn't hear that, that was Joe Biden last week, asked what he wants his legacy to be, and he responds by saying he cured the economy and the environment.
Just a bit outside. He tried the corner and missed.
The NASDAQ is down 600 points today alone. The Dow is down over 1,000 points as sell-offs, which started on Friday, continued overnight in the Asian markets and kicked back up this morning on Wall Street when they got down to business. The sell-off, we're being told, started after a very weak U.S. jobs report was posted last week, stoking fears of an actual recession. Those fears turned into panic over the weekend, and that's where we seem to be now. Nearly $2 trillion had been wiped out of the U.S. stock market earlier today when the NASDAQ was down over 1,000 points, but rebounded slightly. $1 billion was wiped out of cryptocurrency markets as well. One major stock whose price is up compared to where it was earlier this month is Lockheed Martin. In completely unrelated news, the Shin Bet Security Agency of Israel has prepared an underground bunker in Jerusalem where senior political leaders are expected to stay during a state of emergency. Iran has continued its saber rattling over the last 72 hours after earlier last week a top Hamas leader was killed within Iran by a bomb that had been placed inside of his residence weeks ago. We now know, thanks to Judicial Watch, that around 240 million U.S. taxpayer dollars were funneled to the Taliban after that terrorist group set up fake nonprofits to leech funds meant to be used for humanitarian purposes after our botched pullout from Afghanistan. The UK maybe just witnessed their version of J6. Gangs of Muslim orcs clashed with Englishmen, with some of the latter allegedly setting fire to a hotel used to house illegal aliens. The violence followed a week of unrest after a stabbing attack that killed 3 young girls in the northern city of Southport. It's unclear what the identity or nationality of that stabber is. New British Prime Minister Keir Starmer reacted.
Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has reversed his department's plea deal with the mastermind of 9/11. Apparently, the backlash to that news that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed would get off without a death penalty was so severe it reached Austin less than 48 hours later. Austin relieved the Defense Department official responsible for making the pretrial motion of his authority in the matter and said the capital punishment case against the terrorists would continue. And finally, this from Joe Rogan seems appropriate today.
You know, it's just good to see everybody having a good time. The country's almost back to normal before World War III. COVID was just so strange. We lost a lot of people during COVID, and most of them are still alive. Yeah, right? Yeah, there's a lot of people that I don't with anymore. Before COVID, I would have told you that vaccines are the most important invention in human history. After COVID, I'm like, I don't think we went to the moon. I think Michelle Obama's got a I think Pizzagate is real. I think there's direct energy weapons in Antarctica. I'm just kidding. I don't think Michelle Obama's got a but I believe all that other
And that's what happened while we were away.
I hate to say it, man, but that is, the bleeps aside, that is prophetic as almost anything you will hear in America today.
Sure.
Is that clip from Joe Rogan right there.
Sure. Well, when the church isn't doing it, somebody's got to.
Indeed. What is it Whitlock always says? That the church and comedians are who most cultures usually allow to tell them truths in ways that they typically don't want to hear from other sources, if something is along those lines, right? Aaron's montage brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. Remember back in the day when you could be more mobile, agile, and hostile, and now you're like, well, those days have passed. I mean, they might have. I mean, it's not like, these physical forms live forever. They don't. All creation groans, of course. But it could be that maybe you're giving up the ghost there a little prematurely. No guarantees, but over the years, over 1 million people have taken Relief Factor, and 70% of them have seen such great results in 3 weeks or less that they've stuck around long-term with the product. What is it? It's a supplement, though it was created by physicians who can prescribe drugs. It's a supplement that goes after the inflammation in your joints that is likely the cause of that chronic pain that has made you not as agile, mobile, and hostile as you used to be. All right. So give it a shot. It costs just $20 to see if you don't see a difference in 3 weeks or less with the 3-week quick start at relieffactor.com. Again, head over to relieffactor.com. Again, relieffactor.com. I want to read some headlines for you today that I have shared in my X or Twitter feed so far this morning. I want to reiterate again, multiple brokerages, including Charles Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard, TD Ameritrade, E-Trade, UPS, CenturyLink, and Interactive Brokers. In other words, every brokerage house you've heard of, okay, are currently down and reporting errors amid market crashes. This is the first 1,000-point decline ever in the history of the NASDAQ. I am looking right now at a chart of what is happening. This is the largest sell-off of assets and indices in terms of commodities like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and others in human history is what is happening right now. And some of that's, let's not exaggerate too much here. Some of that is because some of these products, weren't around in 1929. Okay? All right. But that point still, we're talking about the overall amount of wealth that has been lost. Apple, one of the top 10 corporations in the world, has lost $240 billion in market cap so far. Apple, $240 billion. This is after Berkshire Hathaway announced they were going to sell about half of their Apple stock as a result of the current downturn that we are seeing. Japan's stock market has posted its biggest two-day drop in history. Crypto markets have erased more than $500 billion in market cap in the last 24 hours, and my Bitcoin account certainly reflects that. South Korea has halted all sell orders on their stock market. We're looking at the largest decline in Taiwan's stock market since 1957 today. I mean, this is the worst day for Japan's Nikkei index since the 1987 Black Monday crash. A lot of people are going to have analysis about what is happening here on the technocratic side. And a lot of times when I use the word technocratic, it has a negative connotation, but it doesn't have to be negative. I mean, we were a very technocratic show during COVID. We were very much driven by data, processes, what we were actually seeing, what we weren't seeing. Okay. So it's just that often it's not that being technocratic is bad. It's that we often in our godless society have elevated technocratic ideologies to a mythological like status. I always think back to that clip we've often cited, that line from Matt Damon on the movie where he's stranded on Mars. I can't remember what it's called, right? Okay. Yeah. Where he says, I got to science the bleep out of this. Like science is magic. Okay. It's not truth. Science is not, hey, the apple fell on Newton's head and that made him discover the concept of gravity. And now Newton conjures gravity. Okay, Ben Franklin flies a kite into a thunderstorm and discovers electricity. Now he conjures it. He finds the formula, the mantra, okay, the incantation by which the electricity will come forth. You see what I'm saying? That's what we've done with technocratic stuff, because something, never forget this, something will always rule, something must always be worshipped. That is the two iron laws of every culture east of Eden in creation, world without end. Amen. Something must always rule, something will always be worshipped. Okay? So if you buy into the lie that there are secular things within God's creation, that God basically created the world and then said, you know what though, but I'm going to just not take part in any of that kind of stuff. Congratulations, you're not a Christian. Actually, you're more of a deist. Or just a heretic. Okay? So that's not true. There's nothing secular. There's nothing outside the purview of the sovereignty of God. Nothing. Now, there are certainly different sectors where he exercises his sovereignty differently than in others, but it is still his sovereignty to exercise nevertheless. Nevertheless, though, if you are going to say, you're going to lie to yourself and conjure a sector or world where godlessness is the rule, well, something must still be worshipped, and a lot of times technocratic process will be that thing. There are going to be people, I mean, heck, our good friend Jill, watch Blaze News tonight. I mean, she's cash money on this stuff. There are going to be other places where you're going to be able to go to get better technocratic analysis. I mean, I just was reading before we went on the air what's going on with the Japanese yen that's contributed to all of this. And about half of it I understood. Okay? But ultimately, we are a biblical worldview show. And primarily, that's what we are. And that's our prime directive. So I think it is through that lens that we should analyze what is occurring right now. Because this wasn't on anybody's docket a week ago. Otherwise, they would have started these sell-offs a week ago. This was on nobody's docket a month ago. Otherwise, they would have started these sell-offs a month ago. And I don't think it's any coincidence that this is coinciding with the increasing likelihood of some escalation, maybe, let's hope not full-scale escalation, but some escalation of war in the Middle East. I don't think that's a coincidence. Now, are there things that we have done wrong that exacerbate these issues? Sure. I mean, it seems trite now, but go back and look at when Todd and I were growing up before Aaron was born, what was said about the deficits being run during the 1980s. I mean, we weren't going to survive that. So this idea that we just started spending money and printing money that we don't have with COVID is not true. Now, we did it more and worse than we'd ever done before. That is true. The CARES Act was a disastrous piece of legislation. It's going to end up being one of the worst in American history. But also understand that if your position is going to be, I will never vote again for somebody who voted for that, you're basically down to voting for Thomas Massey alone because everybody else did. And that's okay. Tom's a good dude. You want to write him in? I mean, that's your vote. You get to do that. But that's what you're down to. Every state, Florida, Iowa, where we live, they all took the money. I mean, show me your returned check. I think it was less than 20% of American households made more money, so much money that they didn't qualify for the stimulus payments during COVID, maybe even less than that. So by all means, show me the uncashed check. Maybe that was you. Cool. Email me, steve@stevedeace.com. I don't recall. Do you guys recall getting a bunch of notes from people? I'm not doing any of this money. I'm giving it back. Do you guys? I don't recall seeing a bunch of that. I mean, I know some people are lamenting that none of the major candidates for president are for reining in the spending. You have it backwards. Of course they're not for reining in the spending. But do you know why? Because they're candidates for president. And there isn't a constituency for reining in the spending, guys. There isn't one. This constituency doesn't exist. You have to live in the world as it is, not the way you want it to be. Otherwise, you're basically exactly what the other side does, wish casting. We'll just violate all forms of natural laws. Well, the first law is that human behavior is sinful. And especially if there is not an institution in the culture to be the guide and the conscience of that culture, it's just going to get even more sinful. Now, if I was to look at this purely politically, and I looked at the two candidates for president, does Donald Trump bear some blame for what is happening here? Yes. He signed that disastrous piece of legislation into law. He deserves some of the blame for this. But I would imagine 99.9999999% of people in this audience voted for somebody who also voted for that piece of legislation. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I don't know why he gets held accountable for it, but your Republican member of Congress that you voted for and that voted for it, why he does not. I'm just not going to let you get away with Trump breaking your brain. I don't care which direction, leftward or rightward, he has broken your brain. But if you want a broken brain from Donald Trump, we will not be the show for you. I will not let you get away with it. And I don't care if I'm the last show on earth that doesn't let Trump break my brain. I'm just that damn stubborn. This idea he wasn't an emperor, that he just does things on his own. That's not how that worked. Lots of people voted for it. Because we were in a panic. We didn't know what virus and everything we were up against. But here, let me share this with you. If you're one of those people. This is where the inflation rate was on August 1st of 2020. So the CARES Act's already been put into effect for many months. This is where the inflation rate was on August 1st, 2020 compared to August 1st, 2024. Energy, 0% inflation, 38.8% under Joe Biden. You know why that's a problem? What's the largest industry in America? Do you guys know what it is?
That?
It's that one. In fact, let me just pause there. If Donald Trump did everything else Joe Biden did in his second term, open borders and millions of illegals flooding over the border to destabilize, played into let's have a thermonuclear war over Ukraine, okay? Gave Iran back all the funding to essentially get aggressive and reassert itself in the Middle East. Let's say he did everything Joe Biden did. Now, if you think Donald Trump would have done all those things, I just don't know what America you lived in from 2017 to 2019. I just don't. I mean, you're either a communist or you have Trump-induced retardation. You have allowed him to retard you. But let's say that you're right. Let's say that he would have done everything Joe Biden did. An Inflation Reduction Act that didn't reduce any inflation. Let's say he would have done it all. If he would have just done one thing, had the same energy policy he had for 4 years as president compared to this Biden one, how much different would it be, do you think, where we are right now, guys, if the number one industry in America was not at 38% inflation? A lot. A lot is the answer. Because do you know what industries require energy?
All of them?
All of them, guys! All of them. Unless you're in the Anabaptist economy, then you're good, okay? But the rest of us aren't.
Talk to me.
We may be joining you soon. How much room's on that wagon? Because we're watching our retirements get pancaked like Kamala Harris and Willie Brown's hotel. But this regime is doing more damage than Kamala Harris's husband in the nanny pool. Even if all Donald Trump had done is maintain the same energy policy he had done for his 4 years as president and did everything else in his second term, had he gotten reelected, that the Biden regime has done. Even if he would have done all the same stuff, he wouldn't have. Now, did I sit here and say this would have been a clinic on supply-side economics? Is that what I said? Did I say that, well, this would have been like a textbook deconstruction of the Great Reset? Is that what I said? No. But if he just would have, if you think he would have made these same decisions, I don't know what to tell you. But even if you're right, and he just would have stuck with the same energy policy that he had the entire time, including during COVID, how much better off would we be right now if the number one industry in America wasn't at 38% inflation? Because that's causing a lot of the other inflation. You know, those goods and services you buy, do they get transporter beamed to your home, guys? Is that what happens? Well, even if they did, it wouldn't matter because that would require molecular energy, so that would be inflation, right? Okay, but they get trucked there, right?
Yes.
And the cost of the gas and everything else, the companies just eat all that, right? That gas is $3.80 a gallon now instead of $1.80. They're like, we'll just take that cost into ourselves because we're just that kind of guy. Is that what they do?
Yeah.
Or do they pass all those costs on to you as a consumer, which makes all your goods more expensive?
That one.
That one. Even if he had just had, that's it. Even if he did every mistake Biden did and just would have maintained the same energy policy he had compared to Biden, everything would be a lot better right now. I'm not even going to read the rest of the list because it doesn't matter. That's why energy is number one. It's the Rosetta Stone of this. When you make a movie like Nefarious, you get immersed in spiritual warfare pretty consistently. You guys have heard all those stories, right? And what you find when you're immersed in spiritual warfare is that things don't happen on your timetable either way, okay? Like you're about to start filming a movie, you prepared 2 years for a film, and you get a call, one of your producers calls you, Chris calls you and says, hey, our two other directors, Chris and Carrie, are in the emergency room right now with COVID pneumonia, and they're probably getting admitted. Oh, what do we do? Right? Didn't have that on that wasn't on our filming schedule. COVID pneumonia for 3 months, maybe you won't even live. That wasn't on our schedule, okay? You get a call you get an email one day from a guy named Brian Jeremiah Smith who says, hey, if you need help editing, here's my resume, and it's like Oscar-winning movies, okay? And you have no idea at that time you even need an editor. But the Lord knew. So that's why we got that email from Brian Jeremiah Smith right when we needed it. You'll find when you're operating in spiritual warfare, things don't happen as planned. Because we're now dealing with things in the unseen realm, and they're not as succumbed to time as we are. They have their concept of time is different. I 100% the stuff that's happening right now is exactly what they were planning to do, the spirit of the age, planning to do if Trump had won. They couldn't kill him, couldn't stop him, couldn't get him to, even if Donald Trump could not possibly step on enough rakes to blow this election. I think this was the fallback plan, what's happening right now. I think the stuff that's happening right now is what they intended to do to him for another COVID. Just drop this crisis right on his lap and say, this is why you have to give us all of our fever dreams, and the new 2 million dead would be 20% unemployment or something like that, right? And you don't want to be responsible for that, right? But isn't it fascinating this is all happening right now? And isn't it fascinating that this is occurring right at the time that we're all on this Kamala Harris psyop sugar high of polling, where she still has been a candidate, the presidential candidate, for 14 days and still has not done a single interview yet? Because spiritual warfare works both ways. Moves and counter moves. I 100% believe that what you were seeing right now was intended to be dropped the first quarter of next year. So I don't believe this is. I don't believe this is from the dark side. I think this is providential. I do. Now, that doesn't mean we do evil so good may come. My point is this was going to happen regardless. We were not escaping this. This outcome was inevitable. They have been holding this thing up, man, with bailiwicks and Band-Aids and chants to Domamu, okay? It was just a matter of time. But I think that the spirit of the age wanted this dropped in Trump's lap next year. And now it's dropped in its lap. I think it's also possible you're looking at divine judgment on everybody for playing into these unequal weights and measures of these artificially inseminated economies and fiat currencies. I think it's possible both those things are occurring at the exact same time. And I think it's possible you're watching the kind of events that lead us to the kind of culmination of history stuff that we've been discussing as Christians for 2,000 years. But I also think that we need to be considering events like this beyond just the technocratic paradigm. I think there is definitely spiritual warfare happening right now. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, and we were just discussing inflation and everything is still too expensive. But did you know that MD Hearing recently cut their prices in half despite all of the current craziness? And that's one of the reasons why we are proud to partner with MD Hearing. They just made their Neo rechargeable digital hearing aids only $297 a pair. That's over 90% less than clinical hearing aids. And the Neo fits inside your ear, so no one will even know that it's there. Plus, MD Hearing just launched the Neo XS, their smallest hearing aid ever. MD Hearing was founded by an ENT surgeon who saw how many of his patients needed hearing aids, but just simply could not afford them. He made it his mission to develop a quality hearing aid that anyone could afford. So if you want to give them a shot, had MD Hearing equip my stepdad with a hearing aid a couple of years ago. He has absolutely raved about it ever since. It's as good as premium quality hearing aids, $297 for a pair of hearing aids this good. It's absolutely crazy. All right, so get the hearing you deserve with MD Hearing. Go to shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code STEVE to get their new $297 when you buy a pair offer. That's shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code STEVE to get their new $297 when you buy a pair offer. Plus, they are adding a free extra charging case for a $100 value just for listeners of this show. That's shopmdhearing.com and use our promo code STEVE to get their new $297 when you buy a pair offer. So we were talking at the end of the last segment about what is unfolding economically right now, where you are watching a 2008 level event at a minimum is taking place as we speak. And I don't think it's any coincidence, as I said a few minutes ago, that this is coinciding with what is expected to be occurring in the Middle East. You're seeing flights have been canceled in and out of Tehran and Israel for the last few days. And people I've talked to, and Bob Vander Plaats is here with us now. He's been over to Israel many times, has even better sources than I do. But people that I talk to who normally just kind of roll their eyes at Iran's pronouncements, like when they promised, they put out that propaganda video earlier this year, Bob, and basically just got obliterated by a multilateral response and the Iron Dome. It was clear they were just trying to save face. I'm hearing from people, I know what you're hearing, but I'm hearing from people that think that this actually is not just going to be a face saver this time. This might be real escalation from Iran. They see the opening here.
Yeah, it's real time. They see weak leadership. Matter of fact, they see unstable leadership with the U.S. because not only do you have Biden being Biden, but now you got the threat of Kamala Harris. Kind of like I came from behind the curtain, I'm actually running things. That makes our country and Israel more and more unstable and a bigger threat. My sources in Israel are saying, just like this war with Hamas, when this happened on October 7, I don't know if you know, Steve, but we were planning on taking a delegation October 20. I thought this was a flare-up. Israel beats them down, and all of a sudden, we still go October 20. And this has been a war like we were not anticipating. This is a real war with Hamas. They want to uproot it. But Israel's digging in now. And Israel's basically, I think, calling everybody's bluff. We told you about Hamas. We told you about Hezbollah. But the real threat's always been Iran. And so I think now they're willing to take ground and to stand ground in this war with Iran, but they're taking it very, very real. This is not going away. And I think part of the reason it's not going away is what they see with the United States, with Biden and with Kamala. I think the market right now, you're seeing the same thing, Biden and Kamala. I thought Trump's always good at naming people. We know that from Lion Ted to Little Marco, Low Energy Jeb, the others. I just saw in a Truth post of his where he calls it the Kamala crash, meaning this is a real deal. They're not putting up with all the woke policies. You can say anything you want about business. They still want the bottom line.
If you are sitting over there right now,
over where?
In Bibi Netanyahu's administration, okay, I'm not sure how you could. Your primary responsibility is to your own people. That's not.
You have a right to defend yourself.
Yeah, it's not your only. Okay, because we are dealing with things that can spill out and engulf numerous different nations and alliances into your conflict. But your primary goal is to defend your own people. And when you're seeing an administration that last week was going to give a plea bargain to the mastermind of 9/11.
Exactly.
And then they did some overnight polling of that and revoked it. Okay.
All of a sudden, Kamala's team came in and said, this dog will not hunt.
Correct. Now, the Hamas caucus there was planning, this was their payback to essentially try to relieve tensions after Israel took out a couple of members of the High Islamic Command. And so this was their payback. And then the Kamala's people came in and said, yeah, we're going to get murdered if you guys do this, so we're not doing it. But if you're looking at that level of instability between the president's obvious dementia, who's really calling the shots, between the fact that Kamala Harris is just, and it's just not even partisan. The woman, just like it's not partisan to say Joe Biden has dementia, the woman is a moron. The woman is just an absolute moron. She's the very definition of it.
And she's extremely far left.
She's extremely everything.
Yeah.
If you're Bibi Netanyahu, and the absolute earliest that someone, and think about the fact we're claiming someone with Trump's mercurial nature as basically the solidifying force here. But at least you kind of know that what Trump will often message craziness, but then act in a much more institutional way. That's sometimes to our own criticisms on the right, okay? But I would imagine globally that would explain his success, that you actually like that, okay? Because you can kind of game theory where he's going to go, right? If you're Bibi Netanyahu, and the absolute earliest that you know that Donald Trump, and there's no guarantee that he's even going to win, can get into that office is late January of next year, and it's August the 5th. And you are seeing the amount of destabilization that the Democrats are willing to put this country through to get their way, whether it's trying to assassinate or allow the assassination of their political rival, which I absolutely believe is what happened. 100% believe it. 100% that's what I believe occurred. Okay, whether it's allowing the border to be completely and totally overrun. All right, I mean everything that you're seeing right now. How can you react if you're Bibi Netanyahu? How can you react in any way other than the way he is reacting? If anything, I would argue, and I've been a Bibi critic at times, I think he's kind of overrated, frankly. Yeah. Okay? But if anything, I think he's actually shown a lot of restraint. Because I would think you'd be very tempted to say, we are completely on our own and have to act accordingly.
Well, without question. And I think when he came to Washington, D.C., and I was in D.C. when he came to D.C., I didn't attend his speech, but I was with those who did attend his speech. And his deal there was basically to call out all of these people and put it on the line. And you saw one side of the chamber, which was only about 50 people, because a lot of them didn't show up. A lot of those seats were filled up with other guests. They didn't show up for the Prime Minister of Israel, to basically that we stand with Israel.
And from a Bibi perspective, one interjection, here's the thing to understand. From a Bibi perspective, they are the party in power.
Exactly.
Because they're in control of the State Department, foreign policy. So even though they're not the majority in the Congress, they are the party in power if you are a foreign country.
And they sat on their hands. But he was laying out the case. Even when he said, basically being for Palestinians, being for Hamas, it's like chickens saying, I'm for KFC, and, the gays for Hamas type thing. But he was laying out the case of why the United States should not blink. They should show no room between the United States and Israel, because what's at stake, and it's in our own country's best interest. It's not just a war on Israel, it's a war on the United States. It's just not a war on Israel, it's on the war on Western civilization. He laid out the case, understanding I'm going to be on my own here. I know I'm going to be on my own. And I'm trying to buy myself 6 months. And then hopefully you get a Trump administration in there. Because with the Trump administration, I think he believes a lot of these bad actors start standing down. But right now they see an opening. So what they're going to do, they're going to try to seize the opening.
This time 4 years ago, we were actually beginning to formalize the Abrahamic Accords. I believe they were actually signed in September of 2020. Yep. All right. Netanyahu was communicating directly with Saudi Arabia. I think that's the first time ever that an Israeli prime minister had direct communications with the House of Saud there in Saudi Arabia. Iran was essentially just neutralized on the global map. Now they have essentially been refunded with money from the Biden administration. Now you are seeing destabilization there in the Middle East. I mean, listen, man, I'm never going to be on the Mar-a-Lago speaker circuit. I'm never getting invited into the Booster Club. I think that's pretty clear, okay? And nor would I ask to be. But I don't know how anybody could look at these two situations, unless you're a communist or if you've allowed you have Trump-induced retardation, could look at what I just laid out and what we are looking at right now and how this is spilling out into economic global markets and think to yourself, no, there's really no difference and nothing will be any different if one guy wins and one guy loses. I mean, I do think we've nominated guys in the past where that is true. I really don't think there was anything markedly different between John McCain and Mitt Romney than Barack Obama. And the way they behaved in the Senate before and after their presidential campaigns absolutely reinforces my analysis where that is concerned. But this guy has been president before, Bob. And so we have records. We can see things. Everybody wants to go by the stuff everybody puts in the latest tweet, Truth Social post, or press release. Like the actions they did aren't meaningful, okay? This time 4 years ago, Iran was the redheaded stepchild of the Middle East. It was a nothing regime, and there was even talk of maybe them seeing protest from their own youth that would destabilize their regime. Netanyahu and the Saudis are talking directly. We are formalizing the Abrahamic Accords. I don't know, Bob. Again, right now I do have the only Trump sign in my yard in a 3-mile radius that I have seen in my entire suburb. Okay, but those seem like pretty obvious truths to me, Bob.
Well, they are obvious truths.
I mean, what do you think? You're the guy. I mean, Trump's called you a crook, everything you could possibly imagine. Okay, so you tell me, have you let Trump retard your brain that you can't see those obvious differences yourself?
To me, when I take a look at this election, I think it's just a choice between good and evil. And that's not a characterization of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. I just think a difference in vision, a difference in administration. You're right. Iran being from the redheaded stepchild to being emboldened in their war against Israel with Hamas, firing missiles from Hezbollah. And then you have China and Russia playing this game as well as North Korea. This is like a Joel Rosenberg novel playing out, and you need to see the facts the way they are. Everybody knows that I've had my issues with Donald Trump. Donald Trump's always been very good to me. I mean, he's communicated with me in the last week. Okay. So, yeah, but I also understand a Trump administration versus a Kamala administration are two very different visions. And what's happened in the Middle East is not by coincidence. What's happening to the worldwide stock market today is not by coincidence. I think this is going to be a time for choosing. Is Donald Trump going to be your favorite person? For some of you, yes. Other people, no. But is there going to be a clear difference in leadership in the administration? Definitely there's going to be. You know, Steve, I mean, I backed Ron DeSantis. I went all in for Ron DeSantis. The people didn't choose Ron DeSantis. They chose Donald Trump. But now you take a look at it, you have a binary choice. You can throw in Kennedy if you want or others if you want. The fact is you have a binary choice. Either you're going to have Kamala Harris, and you're going to see an emboldened global stage against everything we believe in Western civilization, as well as a continued economic meltdown, in my opinion, or you're going to have a Donald Trump. And you're right, he's got a record from 2016 to 2020 on the Middle East, the global stage, as well as the economy and the stock market. To me, the choice is going to be clear. I'm hoping anyhow, the reason all this stuff is being unveiled so America sees us as well, and we actually choose well on November 5.
Yeah, on the economic front, before you came on, I said I think this is all spiritual warfare. And on the economic front, I think what you're seeing happening today, the spirit of the age wasn't planning it to unfold this until next year if Donald Trump had won, and then just dump this all in his lap. But spiritual warfare works both ways. On the other side, I think we are underestimating. This is BB's last run. This is his last chance to secure the security of his people, and he is seeing the amount of destabilization the party in power is willing to do to their own country. Okay. Well, we have no idea how a math club shooter shimmied a wall with a rifle and got multiple rounds off before he got taken out from 500 yards away, and he got multiple rounds off from 150 yards away. We have no idea how that happened. I mean, he's just crawling up there on the roof. You can see from the dorsal view, he's impossible to miss. Okay, we won't secure our own borders. Okay, we did an Inflation Reduction Act that was just nothing but another, grift of just payoffs and money prints. Okay, if you're Bibi Netanyahu, this is your last run. And again, you have faced all forms of political corruption and everything else in your own country already. This is it for you. This is your last moment to secure your people, and you're looking at your only one true ally in the world. And you're seeing the party in power is willing to totally destabilize their own country to maintain their power. I don't see how you think you can trust them at all. No. And I think the kinds of things that that are on, I think there are things on the table right now that we have not considered because of that. Because I think you're talking about a guy at his age, he's not buying green bananas either. These people are all like 80 years old, all right? And he's like, this is it. Okay, and I'm looking over there, and I mean, they're doing coups, they're doing assassinations, they got wide open borders, they're destroying their own economy. I mean, the people in power in the U.S. will destabilize their own country and their own people. How the hell can we over here trust them?
And as you guys listen to this, I'm talking about your audience now, as you listen to this, thank God for Bibi Netanyahu. The reason is, I believe he is now a buffer because every time you go to Israel, what they're going to tell you, what the geopolitical forces are going to tell you, is Israel is the little Satan. The United States is the big Satan. Israel is our buffer right now to the United States. And so I think we have to take a look at this. We link arms with the nation of Israel. There's no doubt they're seeing the destabilization and the uncertainty of leadership that's taking place on an economic front, but foreign relations front as well. And hopefully he buys us time into January, and that's if we win that election on November 5. But I do agree with you as well, Steve. We talk about it all the time here at the family. This is spiritual warfare. I mean, all the way from the Olympics opening ceremony. I mean, evil is coming out on front of the stage and saying, I want to be applauded, I want to be cheered, and I want to be voted for against what is good and what is righteous. That's not Trump being good and righteous. I'm saying what is good and righteous, moral. So anyhow, the choice is going to be ours.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
All right, next hour, like we talked about at the top of the show, one of the reasons that we are in, if not the main reason, we are in this position in the West is that the church in the West, it's not dying, it's euthanizing. It is choosing the drip. It has divested itself from its mission to disciple the nations. And so it needs to be confronted, frankly. And that's going to require some uncomfortable conversations. And one of them we're going to have next. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. And then you can also, if you listen to the podcast version and you wouldn't mind, you can also make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And thanks to all of you that have done that for us. And you can also, if you haven't done this yet, hit subscribe, or if you're on iTunes, follow. And that way, every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your feed every single time, and we thank you very much for that as well. This part of the show is brought to you by our friends over at Voice of Judah, and man, good timing to be talking about them. I want to just quickly reiterate what I was saying last hour to Bob Vander Plaats. If you are Bibi Netanyahu, and Todd, you brought up a good point too during the break. This cuts both ways. My point does. If you're both in Tehran or Tel Aviv, you are looking at the current state of the United States and you are thinking, we have to act now. If you're in Tehran, you are thinking, when will we ever get a window like this again? Our simps are in charge. They re-empowered us economically. They at least think there's some form of moral equivalency between us and Israel. Even if it's not 50-50, it ain't 99-1 either. There's some form of moral equivalency between us and Israel in the current administration's belief system. What the percentage is it 40%? Is it 28, 17, 39? I don't know what the exact percentage is, but it's not insignificant. It's a not insignificant percentage of moral equivalency between Islamofascism and Israel. And they're in total disarray. One day they're going to give Khalid Sheikh Mohammed a plea bargain. The next day they're not. When would we? And Israel is isolated. Do the Saudis really want to be seen? Does the House of Saud, where in a country where there are still quite a few schools of Wahhabism, by the way, do they really want to be seen as siding with the Zionist? Even over their non-Muslim or non-Arab Muslim. We may be step family and extended company here as Persians. But these Isaac followers, they're out of the covenant. Does the House of Saud really want to be seen siding with the Zionist cucks? Right?
Right.
And then if you're on the other end and you're Bibi and you're thinking, as I just said a few minutes ago, the amount of destabilization that this administration is willing to do to its own country, to its own political party, in order to get the outcome that it wants, we are on our own. We have no allies left. It's literally Israel versus the world. I mean, cavalry's not coming, guys. Right?
Right.
And it's August 5th. 5.5 months until somebody else gets sworn in to be president of the United States. Ask yourself, 5.5 months ago. Do that. 5.5 months ago, 1st of March, Trump had not been indicted yet by Alvin Bragg. Imagine, actually 5.5 months ago is actually middle of February. My math is bad because we're in early August. 5.5 months ago is early February. Go back. This will really put things in perspective because now I'm freaking me out. 5.5 months until you can get another president sworn in, and that's even if we can pull this thing off. 5.5 months. Go back to late February, 5.5 months, late February, and tell yourself in the next 5.5 months, you will see Donald Trump indicted on more than 90 felonies, nearly assassinated, and the Democrats would just coup Joe Biden out of office. Maybe you might have predicted one of those. Maybe, because lots of people thought there's no way they could run Biden again, thought that for quite a while, right? Maybe you might have predicted that, or maybe you would have seen all of the various legal lawfare things, because we were talking about it even all of last year, that if they can get away with imprisoning him, that they will, right? Okay. But put all those things on the table in late February and tell yourself that that's all going to happen in the next 5.5 months. A coup, an almost assassination, and a coup. I don't know what else, whatever you want to call it. All right. What's going to happen in the next 5.5 months?
You haven't even mentioned here in the English-speaking West, there are parts of England that are going full Chaz right now in terms of the Arab Street taking over. Yep. So you don't think Iran's looking at that and drawing energy from that?
Correct. This is one of the reasons we're aligned with our friends at Voice of Judah Israel, because there is a great opening right now, and who knows how many more of these we're going to have, to bring the gospel back to where it was given to us. If you want to support that, they do fantastic humanitarian work for the Jewish people, but they do so also as a part of their overall ministry, which is evangelism, discipleship, and church planting in the land of Israel. If you want to support that or learn more about that, vojisrael.org/Steve is where you can go. That's vojisrael.org/Steve. Again, vojisrael.org/Steve. All right. It's time here to have a serious convo. The church has failed this country. And it has failed the West. There was never a West until the church. Therefore, there will not be one without it. And there was never an America before the church. Therefore, there won't be one without it. These are symbiotic relationships. Now, let me say this from the outset, because I know some of you can't withstand the temptation to Jesus juke, which always fascinates me when some of you articulate this, because I'm like, then why are you like listening to like a show about political and cultural engagement? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, if you're that meta about your faith, then I mean, you should just be doing like, 100% evangelism, monastic practices all the time. I've never really understood we're in the end of days, nothing will happen, so let me tune into all the right-wing political podcasts I possibly can until that occurs.
That's what you'd call a tell, though,
yeah, I've just never understood that. That makes no sense to me. I mean, I understand that why someone would think this, and it might even be accurate. We eventually are going to come to that period of time, right? There's no reason it couldn't be right now, right? Okay? Mm-hmm. What I don't understand is why you think that, but then you're like, but I need to make sure I go listen to all the culturally engaged shows I listen to and tell them that it's just the cultural engagement that I'm listening to, wasting my time with, is a waste of theirs. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense.
Set your feet, Steve.
Indeed. That all being said, it is entirely possible that we are living through a meta event. And what I mean by that is something transcendent. A judgment of the West, which, if we are living through that, anybody want to argue it would not be deserved?
It is earned. A
judging of this country, which, if we are living through that, does anyone want to argue that it would not be deserved?
Again, earned.
Okay. Or, and this is actually the best case scenario. I've never understood this either. I've never really understood why believing in a futuristic premillennial eschatology makes one a conspiracy theorist. Like, don't we want Jesus to come back? I've never understood that either. That's never made any sense to me. If anything, I would think you'd be more, you would want to err on the other side of thinking that you can do things to like hasten the Lord's return. Don't we true or false, we want Jesus to come back. Anybody a false on that, guys? Are we true on that? Yes?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Seems solid.
Okay. So it's also possible we are living in an end of days scenario. I want to acknowledge those three meta themes up front. They're all possible and on the table. And I'm not here to argue against or root against either of them. One would be the greatest relief in all of human history, and the other two would be disappointing but completely deserved. Fair?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I also don't know that those three things are on the table. I don't know that they're not. That's why I want to acknowledge them, okay? But I don't know that they are. And I can only operate on that which I know. I can only plow the field the Lord put in front of me. I can't do more than that. So, and I'm from a worldview that proclaims explicitly that mercy triumphs over judgment. So, again, I'm going to bend my bias to grace, not the fake stuff. When I say that, I don't mean that like in the way your skinny jeans wearing American sweater vested pastor means it. It means we're not going to take a stand on anything and there's no truth. That's not what we mean. But that God desires to forgive people, that God desires to redeem people. And the ultimate proof of that desire and the most extreme proof imaginable is what he endured for us during Passion Week, and culminating at the cross. Amen?
Amen.
Okay. So since I know that, since that has been revealed to me, and whether we're in the other three meta areas has not been, I'm going to communicate from that vantage point from this time forward. Is that fair?
Yes.
But I did think we should offer that disclaimer that there could be bigger things going on here than whatever the future is of our particular timeline and culture happens to be.
Yes.
Okay. With that said, I now want to say this. The church has failed the West, and it has failed this country. And as I look through the history of the church and Christendom, I think it's the worst failure the church has ever had, because it's entirely self-inflicted. And the church just quit. It wasn't driven underground from Islamic hordes. It wasn't driven underground by a tyrannical government in Beijing. It literally just quit. It literally just quit. And I don't think it's possible for us to get back on the right track without the church leading the way. And that requires, within the church community amongst ourselves, difficult conversations. There needs to be some accountability. Paul's epistles are usually a joyride, right? Fun reads, stuff of bedtime stories for your children. Kids, liars, thieves, adulterers, fornicators, homosexuals will not inherit the kingdom of heaven, but such as once are going to be some of you. And your 5-year-old's like, what does any of that mean? That's not the stuff of a bedtime story, right?
Well, maybe we need to start there now.
We might need to now, yeah. But it is Holy Writ.
Yes.
Yeah. So much of the New Testament are uncomfortable conversations. Messiah having uncomfortable conversations with his own people. Hey, you guys are missing it here. You're missing it here, right? It's
an R-rated faith.
Yes,
it's an R-rated faith.
That is much of the Gospels. Is Messiah saying, you guys are... ta-da! You guys are missing it. All right, that's much of the Gospels, okay? And much of the rest of the New Testament that comes after that are people being confronted for missing it. All right? We need some confrontation. We had intended to have this conversation about a month ago, but then we decided to try to assassinate one presidential candidate and then, coup d'etat the other. So we're a little behind schedule here. All right? But we introduced you last month to a new venture starting off online called Clear Truth Media. And its goal is very similar to why Conservative Review was created originally when I joined that, which was to hold the Republican Party accountable from the right, from the direction it claims to be coming from. That's what this seeks to do. Not from the right politically, but from the right theologically, as in, are you on the narrow road or not? Or are we placing commas where God has placed periods? Are we gaslighting? Are we memory holing? And they put out a piece almost exactly, I think it was actually 1 month ago, July 5th, correct? Or July 7th, correct me. I'm corrected. So almost exactly to the very day 1 month ago, that I think we need to share and discuss with you. Because I think it's a model of the kinds of conversations that need to take place for correction to happen. And I think it's small a, apostolic. Its tone, its themes are not much different than what you read from Paul in many of his epistles. I'll start that here in a moment after I remind you about our friends over at Patriot Mobile. They are on the cutting edge of the parallel economy, and they reinvest the profits you give them back into the kingdom. Like I've told you before, I've seen it firsthand. I don't recall a conference I have gone to that they have not been a sponsor somewhere. From Pigeon Forge, Tennessee to Des Moines, Iowa just this year. And they have a fantastic product, a fantastic customer service team that is based in America, so you can understand what they're actually saying. If you want to make the switch today and stop giving money directly to people who hate you, you can do that at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Use the offer code Steve, and you'll get a free month of service today to get you started. A free month of service with the offer code Steve at patriotmobile.com/Steve. They'll make it as customizable for you as possible. Keep your phone, switch your phone, keep your number, switch your number. And if you're a veteran or first responder, let them know when you go to make the switch. They've got extra ways to say thank you for your service at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Use the promo code Steve. All right, here's the headline of this piece. The most evil man in evangelicalism and those who platformed him, by Seth Gruber. Starts off with this quote from C.S. Lewis. And if you start off with a quote from C.S. Lewis in italics, I'm usually suckered in at that point. All right? Hey, how do we get Steve Deace to read what we wrote? Start off with an italicized quote from C.S. Lewis. We'll usually do it. Of all the passions, the passion for the inner ring is most skillful in making a man who is not yet a very bad man do very bad things. Seth writes, like all demons, he was obsessed with children. Shedding their blood was preferable. Failing that, he could always cut them up, scalp them, sexualize them, incite them to a sexual frenzy, even castrate them. The possibilities were endless and exciting. Demonic appetite never ceases, and Mephistopheles was hungry. To satisfy his lust, he would need a megalomaniac with a Promethean drive, someone appointed in high places and thus able to devour countless children, and who would be his willing vessel, who would open themselves to such possession. Another Mengele would be hard to find. To satiate this kind of bloodlust, his vessel would have to be soulless, unfeeling, very scientific, and more than anything, in love with power. But most importantly, they must claim to be a Christian. To prevent the foolhardy interference of the enemy's children, his vessel must walk and talk like them. A demoniac wearing Christian face appointed to the highest levels of government would indeed be a prize. Such a man could perhaps even maneuver those Christian vessels into a position more advantageous to his father below. Since Dr. Faustus, Mephistopheles had perfected the art of incentives. The right shiny object at the right time, and any soul was for sale. And with the right vessel, Mephistopheles would no longer need to bargain for the soul of man directly, thus revealing himself and awakening any spiritual intuitions in those Christians. No, they would indeed ruin everything, because American Christians already live as functional atheists, oblivious to the spiritual realm. Best to keep it that way. His new vessel must be able to present the Faustian bargain on his behalf, whilst it remains the puppeteer. That literally is one hell of an open. On August 17th, so to whom is Mr. Gruber writing about? On August 17, 2009, Barack Obama appointed Francis Collins as the director of the National Institutes of Health, the NIH. Lauded as a hero of the faith because he professed belief in God while leading the Human Genome Project some years prior, Collins became a link between Christian institutions and the scientific establishment. An association with Collins meant a pastor can't be accused of being some backward-thinking fundamentalist anymore. I'm not like those other Christians who are actually Christians. Collins' image became synonymous with a more nuanced, reasonable faith. Perhaps even a faith that was academically robust. Ah, yes. Accepted by the very godless institutions who hate us. A year after taking the helm at the NIH, Collins reportedly believed it is not possible to scientifically settle precisely when life begins. That's a direct quote. In fact, before taking over NIH, Collins had already praised eugenic abortions. That's when one prenatally tests the baby to see if they're fit or unfit and disposes them if they're not up to scruff as something people, quote, in our current society are in a circumstance of being able to take advantage of, end quote. And something, quote, we have decided as a society needs to be defended, end quote. Nothing says narrow road quite like, well, as a society, they want to do this. In Francis Collins' faith, Palm Sunday is the culmination, where the palm branches are waved. We never get to Good Friday, where crucify him is screamed. No. It's by consensus and what society wants. Because that's what Jesus told us to do, Genesis through Revelation. What society wants. Blink 5 times if you're in North Korea. And shortly after his confirmation at NIH, Gruber writes, Collins said that establishing, quote, a new human embryonic stem cell registry was one of his highest priorities, because George W. Bush had not let him expand the previous one. If Collins were indeed Mephistopheles' vessel, the demon wasted no time devouring his favorite kind of child, the very small ones. After all, there are no embryonic stem cells without dead babies. In 2006, 3 years before his appointment, Collins published the book, The Language of God. A scientist presents evidence for belief, in which he explains how he found harmony between scientific and spiritual worldviews. However, what many Christians drooling over such a respectable and nuanced Christianity missed is that he defended research on preborn children, quote, so long as they hadn't been expressly used for research. So, I mean, can't make the babies in a lab to research them, but I mean, if we're going to kill them anyway, that extra baby limb and appendage could go a long way, you know, for scientific advancement, right?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to Soylent Green this thing. We've got to have limits, right? Like, it's not that trannyism's bad. We just can't have men and women's sports. Hit a little close to home.
I don't like the fact that the Holocaust happened, but can we make some lemonade out of this thing?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got all these fully developed humans just sitting there, you know, these in the catatonic dead state in the gas chambers anyway. Let's quick harvest those parts before the rigor mortis sets in. We've got research to conduct. However, Gruber goes on to say, his position on this also made space for pursuing scientific discoveries using, quote, the sacrifice and destruction of leftover human embryos from fertility clinics, end quote. I mean, they're going to kill the babies anyway. We're not going to, like, explicitly kill them for this. We're not going Soylent Green. But it's Mengele with a condom on him. Safe Mengele. It's the island of Dr. Moreau with seatbelts. It's that. It's reasonable. It's nuanced. It's sweater vested. It's pleated with khakis. It's skinny jeaned. It's church growth consulted. Gruber continues, let's start with something so disgusting and immoral that it defies explanation. In fact, if it weren't so well documented, it might have fallen into the murky abyss of urban legend, but it's absolutely true. In the fall of 2020, and we talked about this at the time, researchers at the University of Pittsburgh published a study titled Development of Humanized Mouse and Rat Models with Full-Thickness Human Skin and Autologous Immune Cells. In studying how organs reacted to pathogens or infections on human skin, researchers grafted, quote, full-thickness human skin as well as thymuses, livers, and spleens from fetuses onto rodent bodies, creating what they called humanized rat models, end quote. That's literally right out of the island of Dr. Moreau. Where's Bela Lugosi died too soon. Ahead of his time. He thought he was doing a horror movie 100 years ago. Turns out it was a documentary.
Doesn't say anything about humanized rat models in the Bible, Steve.
Apparently it doesn't. Humanized rats, remains of unborn babies purchased from Planned Parenthood and the like, had their scalps removed and subsequently attached to the heads of lab rats. As head of the NIH, not only did Collins approve this study and thus validate its objectives, but he also provided UNI's taxpayer funds to pay for it.
Trust the science.
What do you think Paul would say should be done here, do you think?
Trust the science, I think he would have said.
I think that's probably not what he would say.
No.
That's what we're going to say in our pulpits, but it's not what the man that wrote most of the New Testament would say. I can assure you of that. 1 year later, thanks to the work of pro-life undercover journalists, the University of Pittsburgh admitted to removing the kidneys from born-alive babies while their hearts were still beating. David DeLayden, who helped expose the University of Pittsburgh, discovered that Pitt and the Planned Parenthood abortion providers responsible for its research abortions are allowing babies, some at the age of viability, to be delivered alive and then killing them by cutting their kidneys out for NIH grant money. Collins used his post at the NIH to provide nearly $3 million to the University of Pittsburgh for this program. The university used those funds to develop a tissue hub harvested from the organs of fetuses ranging from 6 weeks to 42 weeks in gestation. You know, I liked tissue hub when it was translated in the original German first. You? It just comes with a certain extra amount of gravitas. In other words, some of the babies they were picking apart were full-term and viable by any medical standard. Instead of being placed in a loving home, they were murdered and scavenged for parts. What did Screw Tape tell Wormwood? Active habits are strengthened by repetition. By the start of 2022, many believers had come to realize that Francis Collins either presided over, ordered, funded, or indirectly participated in the following while leading NIH. Record-level spending on scientific experimentation performed on fetuses obtained from abortions, endorsement of unrestricted funding of embryonic stem cell research, millions of dollars in taxpayer grants spent on transgender research on minors, opposite-sex hormone treatments given to children as young as 8 years old, mastectomies performed on girls as young as 13, and millions of dollars in grants to an app program that tracked teenage boys' homosexual activities, including anal sex, all without parental knowledge. But it's respectable. It's nuanced. It's third way. There is no third way. There's one way. One truth, one life, one Lord. And everything else is the road to hell. And that's what Seth is laying out here. We're about halfway through this piece. I'm going to share the rest of it with you when we come back. Every word. Because this is just one, albeit extreme, but one extreme case study of a literal, shall we say, legion of them, for how the church has failed this country and the West. And spent more time looking for people like Francis Collins to give them legitimacy than understanding the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. More in a moment. Folks, and what great timing. Didn't line it up this way, but man, it just worked out. Given what we're talking about right now with this incredible piece from Seth Gruber over at Clear Truth Media, you can read it there at cleartruthmedia.com, by the way, cleartruthmedia.com. Another reminder, our friends at Jace Medical, I got a text today from one of my best buddies. Hey, I know, I listen to the show every day, man. I've been listening, I've been hearing, should have gotten the Jace case, should have gotten the Jace case, should have gotten the Jace case. Really could use some ivermectin right now. Literally just got that text this morning. And understand that within the world of public health, Francis Collins was like one of the more moderate voices. Like he knew he couldn't just come right out publicly and say, round up the Christians who won't take the jab, because then the Ed Stelzers of the world, that's the guy's name, right? Stetzer, thank you. The Ed Stetzers of the world, they can't lie for you now. They can't deflect for you, cover for you. When you just say that stuff blatantly like that, they can't do that. But understand that that's exactly what many of Francis Collins' colleagues wanted to do. Round you up for not taking it. I mean, they were the ones that were on MSNBC. That's what they really think. That's what the Hydra really thinks. So as much as possible, you can't do it 100%. We can't operate on ourselves. We can't prescribe drugs to ourselves. But as much as possible, exempt yourself from these people's forked tongue purview. Get the Jace case from Jace Medical. Get backups of venerable antibiotics before they next try to take those away from you. And then you can also now expand it to things like ivermectin and other things that you may need. They've widened their menu there. And I know I say this every time because I think it bears saying every time. It's really important I think if you've got a loved one on Medicare, to get them a Jase case, because they are totally at the mercy of the state. All right, go to jase.com, Jase, jase.com/Deace. Enter the code Deace at checkout for a discount on your order, jase.com/Deace. Again, use the code Deace at checkout for discount on your order at jase.com/Deace. So Seth Gruber here at Clear Truth Media has just laid out all of this stuff that Francis Collins has funded at NIH since he took over in 2009. And on second thought, I mean, I know a lot of us were still in 2009 living through the absolution of no longer being racist we received by voting for Obama. That was fun, right? Remember that? We were no longer a racist country. That lasted for 15 minutes. Now we're more racist than ever before. Yes. Okay. Now it's like Selma never happened, and well, no one knows what a Martin Luther King Jr. was, and no one's ever heard of the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendments. Okay.
Probably just a coincidence.
Yes. Now Uncle Tom's Cabin seems like a lofty ideal never to be achieved. Okay. But in hindsight, maybe we should have been suspicious that this was the guy Barack Obama chose. I mean, yeah, God is sovereign. I mean, he could use Cyrus to let the Jews go home, right? I mean, he could use Obama to do something good. I mean, like he used Obama to kill bin Laden. We cheered that, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. But as a default mechanism, like when a guy once named Saul shows up and says, "Hey, I'm Paul now and I'm here to preach." You're not like, "Well, last week you were here to kill, so we're going to kind of monitor this one for a bit." Not saying it can't happen. I mean, we did just, meet a Lord who was dead and now he's alive. Not saying it didn't happen, but we are going to need to see some fruit on that tree. Fair?
Sure.
So we're not shunning you and turning you away, but we're going to at least give some time for some fruit to grow. Fair?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So maybe the fact that this was Barack Obama's chosen Christian appointee should have been the first sign in hindsight that we were being Trojan horsed. Thoughts?
Correct.
So let's continue. Seth writes, sure, Collins didn't perform these experiments I just itemized for you for himself, but then neither did Joseph Mengele in Nazi Germany. They were just the overseers, well documented and thoroughly exposed. Collins's deeds are now public record. Surely his evangelical bona fides are in the deepest depths of Sheol now, right? No major influential Christian leader or pastor would associate themselves with a man who might be considered the 21st century's angel of death, right? Rick Warren, Tim Keller, Russell Moore, Ed Stetzer, David French, and many more. People often refer to these types as Big Eva or Big Evangelicalism. And thanks most exclusively to my friend Megan Basham's unyielding pursuit of the truth in her new book, Shepherds for Sale, we now know that these Christian leaders and pastors platform praised, hosted on their podcast, and drooled over Francis Collins as a hero, as a brother in Christ, and according to David French, quote, a national treasure. Editor-in-chief at Christianity Today, Russell Moore, appreciated the, quote, Christian humility and grace of Francis Collins and said, quote, I can't wait to see how God uses him next to expose people like you there, Russ. Before his death, Pastor Tim Keller thought Collins was, quote, sort of like the prophet Daniel. I mean, Daniel went to the lion's den himself. He didn't actually throw his fellow believers in there. Tomato. Fair? I mean, this is a distinction without a difference, clearly. Okay. Daniel said to the pagan king, yeah, I'm not doing that. And there's nothing you can do or threaten me with that'll change my mind. Francis Collins said to the pagan king, I will do whatever you ask of me, and I will threaten and do whatever I can to the believers to get them to go along with it.
That Fisher guy should do a VeggieTales about him.
Indeed. Yes. I mean, now that I've said that out loud, I mean, I can see why these two individuals would be mistaken for one another. Rick Warren calls Collins, quote, a dear friend for many, many years, and says he's, quote, a man of integrity, a man you can trust. I am confident Francis Collins is a man that Rick Warren can trust. Can I get a witness on that? Now, all of this happened long after Collins finished funding the Mengele-style experiments at the University of Pittsburgh. Like Lot in Genesis, these righteous men listed above also like to refer to pagans engaged in all manner of public evil as their brothers and sisters. If you don't know what Seth is talking about. Before God smites Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot tries to reason with the people. And he has lived among these pagans for many, many years. Right? Him and Abraham, they realize they have to split up the land and their crops and their farms and their wealth. All right? And so Abraham, I think, even gives Lot first pick. Yeah. And Lot chooses to go where Sodom and Gomorrah is. He goes to the bright lights in the big city. Abraham's like, cool, I'm just going to be out here claiming like all this other rural land nobody wants. Right? And Lot has lived there for so long now that he's among them. He's, as the proverb says, bad company corrupts good character. And he tries to reason with the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. He says, brothers and sisters, do not rape these men. And because he's been so accommodating and so tolerant and so third way, and his khakis are so pleated, and his sweater is so vested, and his jeans are so skinnied, and he has shown them the love and grace of God, and not been a divisive force, and not been a political activist, and not been somebody that's got involved in every culture war skirmish, but has ably and capably served the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. They look at him during this terminal moment and they say, by golly, Lot, now we know how you got that name. You got lots of wisdom. You're right. And we'll even just take you up on your kindly offer to just rape your daughters instead and leave these poor men alone. We are, after all, reasonable. No, they turned to Lot and said, who's this Jew? When we're done with these Jews out front, or they think they're Jews, they're angels. When we get done with these Jews out raping the Jews dudes out front, we're going to come back and rape the rest of the Jews, starting, Lot and your kids. You're all next. We're going to rape the angels outside and your family. We're going to rape them all. We're going full bed and schooner. We're raping everybody up in here. That's how they responded. They did that instead. Years of pleated khakis and vested sweaters and kindness and niceness didn't do a damn thing to the damned. Nothing. That's what Seth Gruber's talking about. If we can't exercise the very basic level of discernment, he writes, required to know who our brothers and sisters are and who aren't, then how will we know how and to whom we proclaim the gospel of salvation? Therefore, it should come as no surprise that Ed Stetzer has recently admitted he was behind helping craft the evangelistic message of the He Gets Us campaign that aired during the Super Bowl earlier this year. Of course he did. I should just stop reading now.
If we aren't able to practice discernment, just stop reading after that.
When do we get to the part where we get to touch the hem of his garment?
In what Stetzer calls pre-evangelism, what is that? It's nothing. It's literally nothing, doesn't exist, doesn't happen. Complete psychobabble term. It is, can I get you to not hate me? It's very clear, by the way. I understand. The world makes it very clear what we need to do to get them to not hate us, guys. Don't believe in Jesus. It's just that simple, guys. Every one of the images in their ad portrayed a leftist intersectionality power struggle of the oppressor and the oppressed as defined by our cultural elites. Amen. It did. Though the stated goal was to win souls for Christ, it's easy to see how the ambition of these big Eva overlords has become mere cultural relevance and acceptability. They want a seat at the table. As the battle for souls in the culture has been all but abandoned by evangelical elites, the only prize they seem interested in is cultural acceptability. That will preach. That's Paulian right there. That is Paulian. That's a letter to Corinth right there, which you just got from Seth Gruber right there. So as our culture grows more and more pagan, the lengths these wolves will go to have only grown This is why they welcome a man like Collins with open arms. He represents approval by the establishment. After all, he's kind of a big deal. He was on the cover of Time magazine. These incidents are clues that somewhere along the way, these men stopped being Christian leaders, teaching sound doctrine and refuting false doctrine, like Paul says to Titus, and simply became institutional managers, or as the Bible would call them, I'm adding this now, hirelings. That's the biblical term, hirelings. Now, maybe they had no idea, Seth says, though I find that hard to believe. But any Christian leader who called someone engaging in this kind of activity a national treasure, or a spirit-filled believer, or a brother overflowing with humility, wisdom, and integrity, and who platforms someone like that through their tithe-funded podcast has some major cleanup to do. But none of them responded when Megan Basham at the Daily Wire reached out to them for comment. And that remains true to this day. None of these supposedly godly Christian leaders has anything to say. It's a very well-known Christian virtue that you're not expected to repent. True or false? Indeed, Russell Moore once listened to a student at the University of Chicago question Francis Collins about the NIH funding experiments that harvested body parts from full-term babies at the University of Pittsburgh. As Moore listened to Collins twist himself into pretzels to explain why it's okay to slice up kids for science at an event that he had invited the director of the NIH to attend, the editor-in-chief of Christianity Never had nothing to say. His only response to a student who has more of a chest than he has ever had was to say, I don't have to agree with every Christian on everything. We have to agree with every Christian on some things, or we're not Christians. Slicing up people into body parts and selling them would be one of those things. Russ? Such men enjoy perks and privileges while rubbing elbows with political and cultural elites. Their names adorn bylines in the most fashionable magazines and newspapers. These are all hirelings. They're invited to be guests on Sunday morning news programs and primetime opinion shows. They might even find themselves in a Rob Reiner documentary. The only difference between these men and progressive revolutionaries of today is they only differ on the price tag and form of payment. Like Lot, if provided with the right incentives, our theological betters will not hesitate to toss God's children into the arms of the mob. There's a reason why Rick Warren is invited to Davos by the World Economic Forum every year, but Pastor Jack Hibbs is not. There's a reason why Russell Moore is CNN and MSNBC's Phone a Christian Thinker and Vodi Bakum is not. There's a reason why David French has a weekly op-ed in the New York Times and Eric Metaxas does not. There's a reason why the New York Times would ask Tim Keller to submit articles, but not ask Pastor Douglas Wilson, because the former are hirelings and the latter cannot be bought. And that, folks, is a modern day epistle, what I just read to you. That's how we used to roll around here. When we conquered empires and kingdoms and brought them to their knees. Sometimes without a sword flashed or a bullet fired. That's how we used to roll. We used to communicate like this. But now we don't. And now we're nice. And so we're controlled opposition and conquered. And Donald Trump and Elon Musk are taking the bullets and shots that we used to be worthy of and no longer are. And the West is dead and America is dying as a result. Todd and Aaron, your thoughts after I tell our folks. In fact, let's do this. We'll get you guys' thoughts in the overtime. So you guys got plenty of time?
Okay.
All right, let's do that. Look, I just looked at the clock. It's later than I thought. So today's overtime, we're going to get you guys' thoughts, and the floor is open for the two of you, okay? Folks, Lassie Health isn't health insurance. It's access to health care without all the red tape, restrictions, and inflated costs. Coverage starts as low as plans at $30 a month. You get transparent pricing, comprehensive coverage that is tailored to your needs, and access to healthcare services without breaking the bank. There's no annual or lifetime caps on services, and you can start a plan at any time. For only $30 a month, you get over 400 prescription medications for free, free unlimited virtual mental health counseling, free 24/7 virtual urgent care. lab tests for up to 60% off, imaging tests for up to 75% off. And folks, that's the entry-level plan. There's more options from there. So Lassie Health, as you can see, it's a game changer. Check out affordable plans that put you in control of your healthcare at healthylink.com/Steve. For a limited time, get your first month for free for up to $100 of eligible plans. So get healthy, be healthy, and stay healthy without breaking the bank at healthylink.com/Steve. That's where you want to go. You want to head over to healthylink.com/Steve now. At least check them out to see if it's a good fit to relieve the burden of the spiraling cost of your healthcare today. healthylink.com/Steve. All right, Todd and Aaron, your thoughts on the fantastic piece from Seth Gruber we just read for the show. We'll do that in overtime for subscribers. For the rest of you, see you tomorrow. Until then, Romans 8:28.